Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and today's video is about taking on one of the most intense artistic challenges that you can, a game jam. Now, a game jam is typically a challenge where artists and programmers come together over a period of 24 to 72 hours and try to make a video game from scratch, which, as anyone who's ever waited for a game before knows, games usually take years longer than even the developers promise, so you can imagine how intense this challenge is. It all begins on a Friday. I was taking part in the Ludum Dare, which is one of the most famous and well-respected game jams around. So it all started with the announcement of the theme when we would all officially be allowed to start making the game. I frantically refreshed the site before I remembered that they actually announced the theme on Twitter, so I switched over and saw that the theme this year was Delay the Inevitable. Under this type of time pressure, usually when I have to come up with a creative idea quickly, I always do word associations. It's kind of dorky, but it really does work. So I just took the main two words, delay and inevitable, and tried to think of anything that my brain was jumping to with each of the words. So here are the ideas we have so far. The first one I came up with was about this little ghost girl, and she's basically traveling on a 2D plane around this 3D house, and she can go from room to room and create scary things to happen, like you'd interact with this cross to flip it upside down, or draw like, you know, a little pentagram, or make all the cabinets fly open, and then the couples who would come with a realtor to try to buy the house would run away, and it would delay them moving into her house that she's haunting. This was way too complicated, so we decided not to do this one, but it's definitely something that I thought was kind of cute. There was another idea we had called Nobody's Cool in Middle School, where you try to keep up with like week-to-week trends in like a fictionalized middle school, and you're trying to delay people realizing that you're not actually a cool kid or whatever, and it's kind of like a satire on like trying to change yourself to fit in. This one was just like too complicated for like gameplay aspects. We couldn't really figure it out. There's another one with like a crane machine, and the idea is that you're a little stuffed animal who doesn't want to leave the crane machine, so you try to do various things to prevent the claw from getting you each day. The one we actually ended up going with was Sickly Victorian Boy, which is basically about you operating as a doctor and trying to keep this unbelievably unwell child alive in the Victorian era. And there's like all these things that can be wrong with them, and there's mini games to figure out what his symptoms need and to actually get the stuff that you need to help him. Then I tried to start designing some mini games. I thought it would be fun to have a leech pond catching mini game to give him a leech, scrub some iron off of a pot to help with his anemia, get charcoal out of a hearth, and also to fix his fingers when he accidentally got them in a mousetrap. So this was the idea that that started to actually seem legit. So now that I had an idea, it was time to try to make a schedule so that I could see how it would actually be possible to do in 72 hours. I broke down everything I could think of that the project would need into 1 to 2 hour chunks over Saturday and Sunday primarily, knowing that I would have to also do normal work on Monday, so I probably wouldn't have a lot of time then. And then once the schedule was done, it was time to go to bed because we had spent so much time thinking about what game to do that we didn't really have any more time on Friday to work on it. So that was the end of Friday night's work on the game jam. So as soon as I could, I got started on Saturday morning working on the little boy and the doctor. I called this the micro art. What I really meant was this is like the little sprites in the actual game that you would see moving around the room, whereas I knew there was going to be a more detailed version of the boy that you would see when he was describing his illnesses and talking to the doctor. So I designed both the boy and the doctor based on images that I pulled up, like vintage images of doctors and little boys from the Victorian era. His whole collar and little like button-up situation is like directly lifted from a bunch of different little pictures of Victorian boys I saw, and this doctor was designed partially off of just like general gentleman pictures I saw, as well as apparently some kind of serial killer doctor that was around back in the day. So that's where he got the mustache from. And I did a little turnaround knowing that he's going to have to be able to turn in every direction so that he can actually, like move around. After this, we ordered lunch and I worked through on the environment art. The first thing I wanted to do was a super rough sketch of the interior of the house. I wanted to do 5 different rooms, 4 inside and 1 like outdoor section where the leeches would be. And once I had that visualized, I could start to work on the individual rooms themselves. So I imported a image of the boy sprite so that I could actually like kind of get the size of everything right. He's very cartoony, so that was going to be a difficult challenge to make sure he would look right in the bed and everything, while the doctor is also standing there at his hugely tall height. I made this tiny Victorian child bed with a little blue diamond pattern, and I was making each of these items on separate layers because this game was going to be 2D assets in a 3D world so that we could do cool lighting with Unity. So I had to make every single little piece separate so that they could all be in different places, like the bed could be closer to the viewer and everything, and it would give it this really cool like sort of storybook feeling, almost like a pop-up book. I also made a generic window, wall texture, and a floor texture so that we could sort of use it as spackle between my sort of more finely defined bespoke rooms. I should also mention I briefly believed that I would be able to model all the furniture in Blender before I remembered that I actually don't know how to do that and went back to 2D graphics. I realized I was running late for my timeline, so I immediately jumped over to trying to do the fine detail boy, or the one that would come forward and actually talk to you, the player, about what his symptoms were. So I got to actually like define him a little bit more. I really love his little cartoony version, but I think that this close-up version is even more fun to look at. He's kind of gaunt but also adorable, which I think really fits with the whole Victorian doomed child theme. And I gave him a couple different mouth movements just in case we would have an opportunity to add in like talking. Running late again, I switched on to the next task, which was to create the frames for all the mini games. I didn't want them to just be in sort of like a computery looking box because it wouldn't fit with the whole aesthetic, so I made a little picture frame, and then I had to do an animation of this scroll opening for when the boy wanted to talk to you, because again I also wanted it to fit with the art style and everything. Next thing on the schedule was to have dinner, so I ordered a pesto pizza that someone cut with their eyes closed, it looks like, and then I had to make the item art. This was basically everything you could pick up in the game, so I had to make a little symbol for it. We ended up with 6 items: bandages, a leech, soup, iron powder, charcoal, and a lemon. So I tried as quickly as I could to make reasonably decent looking items. I'm not usually a huge fan of this, but I actually quite enjoyed designing these props. The way that they're all sort of designed is to correlate with his various different illnesses. So the bandages are for injury, the soup is for a cold, the lemons are for scurvy, the iron is for anemia, and the leech is for infection. And as promised, I wanted to make the doctor's bag the actual like interior of the inventory that the player would see, so I had to make sure they would all fit inside nicely. Now technically that should have been Saturday done. That was everything that I had scheduled, but I was looking at Sunday and I was getting very concerned about how much animation I had scheduled on that day, so I decided to stay up and do the leech minigame. Basically it was just a little pond. I had to make a hand that would act as the cursor, a grabbing hand that would catch or not catch a leech, and then I'd have to make 2 animations, one for the leeches underneath the surface and the ones that would pop up that you could grab. And though these animations were actually pretty fun and easy, by the end it was 3:34 in the morning and I was exhausted. As soon as I woke up on Sunday, I knew I had to tackle the thing that I had been dreading the most, the walk cycle for the player character. Now, I actually love animation. You'll see occasionally on my channel when I have extra time, I'll throw in an animation just kind of for funsies. And I really love doing it. I actually did this icon too recently of my VTuber model Lilybell. You know, I love to do this stuff. There's one thing I don't love doing though, and that's walk cycles, especially walk cycles that are like, you know, perfectly to the side where it's really easy to see when you mess up. So needless to say, I was really scared about doing this, and I was right to be scared because the whole first walk cycle that I did for the doctor was such a disaster that like I almost really was like quite depressed. Like I don't know why it got so messed up. I think I just was making it too fast, and I was making the jumps between where the feet would end up a little too dramatic, because by the end of a couple hours of work on this on Sunday morning, he looked like he was doing a funny little jig, and definitely like his feet were sliding all over the place, and it was just an absolute disaster. And I realized in abject horror that I was going to have to completely restart. So, you know, there were parts that I got okay at first, you know, the fact that I was having his torso sort of bob up and down, and that I was separating that from his legs, so I wouldn't have to worry about doing that each and every time. But I could sort of just like follow along with the bob that I had already established. That was all good, but the way I was trying to do the legs was just disastrous. So I ended up having to go back to basics and look up at some like animator's toolkit, kind of like, you know, very basic, like how to do walk cycle stuff. And then it sort of reminded me a better way to approach it. Instead of separating both of the legs and trying to like copy and desync them so that they have perfectly symmetrical movement, I instead decided to actually draw them together and think logically about how the weight was being moved as he moved forward. This was so demoralizing, but then it was so exciting when I finally got it right and everything was sort of flowing correctly. Because this took so much time, I couldn't do a walk cycle on the other side with his doctor's bag on the other side of his leg. So now anytime he walks, he switches hands for how he is holding the doctor's bag, but I don't think it's too noticeable. I mean, it probably is now that I pointed it out, but you know, if you play the game, please don't notice, because I ran out of time. There was just no way I was going to be able to do a whole nother walk cycle on the other side. Anyway, I do think that it turned out pretty cool. I mean, I insisted upon actually having this like scratchy like hatching on him. A lot of the times with animation you want to avoid that because it's so dang tedious, but I stuck with it anyway because I just wanted him to look properly in style for the whole thing. And by the end I was actually really pleased with it. I think the secret is just to go slow with it and make sure that your eyes are never losing track of like which leg is in front. By this point, I was so far behind schedule, I was basically in just pure emergency mode, so I exported a sprite sheet of this to give to the programmer, and then I switched on to trying to make the environment for the kitchen. I was very concerned that we only had one environment in the game so far, so I started working on the kitchen with a sink and stove and everything, and a little cutting board, and then I wanted to have a kitchen island that would be in front of the player, sort of bumped up against an invisible wall, so that it would give some like interesting foreground element. And this is where I wanted the player to be able to pick up the lemon. I also wanted to make these cool sort of like iron wrought windows that real light could come through because we were using a 3D engine and everything. And I set up the wall and like put some like soot and some kind of, not rafters, but those like black bars that they put on walls sometimes. And then I realized I had to make the hearth. At this point, letting my creative vision control me was no longer an option, and I was strictly making items and environments based on whether or not they'd be needed in the actual gameplay. And then I had to make the outside area, which ended up being maybe my biggest mistake after that disastrous walk cycle. So I had this vision for this very like vertical outdoors area. And as you can see, it has the pond, this sort of cobblestone area, the like outdoors of the house, and like a skyline with some shrubbery in the background. I was very much enjoying it. I thought it looked great. Somehow I completely forgot that this game is 2.5D and not 2D, so this whole environment was not useful at all, and I had to remake basically most of the assets involved here. So I made a pattern for the cobblestones that he could actually walk on, as well as a 2D flat image of the door so that could be propped up against the edge of the wall. So yeah, this was a huge mess up on my part. After that, I realized with a broken heart that we only had the assets for one minigame, so I had to make at least one more because I felt like one minigame was just pathetic. Two was at least somewhat acceptable, so I made all of the assets for a linen cutting minigame, which would give the player the bandage. And this was supposed to be in a sewing room, now it's just in his bedroom because I didn't have time for that environment either. Speaking of things we desperately needed, I needed to make a game over screen so that it was possible to lose. So I made a little image of our poor boy dead on the ground. I tried to make it as cartoony and silly as possible because I was starting to realize that this game was a bit of a dark concept. I mean, that is to be expected with a theme like delaying the inevitable, but still, I had to make sure it was mostly kind of cute and not too grisly about, you know, all the child death. Monday was only a partial day and I had to work, so I made this image of the boy for promotional reasons, and I started typing up the description as well as finding sound effects and music to play in the game. And with that, the jam ended at 6 p.m. We barely got it in submitted on time. Luckily, they give you a full hour for submission, so even if your game is having trouble packaging or whatever, you can usually figure it out. And here's a little clip of me playing it so that you can actually see what it's like. So here's how the game starts. You walk up to him and he gives you this indication of what his problem is. So his fingers hurt. So we're gonna cut him out a bandage. And when we give it to him, you can see it adds to his health bar a little. Now, he's saying, does this look infected? So I know that this means that we have to go to the leech pond and get a leech. Alright. Now we got the leech. Go over here. Oops. And give it to him. Perfect. Great. I don't know why Father tells me not to eat the floor cheese. So the hint with this one is that he's eating cheese that was left for the mice or the rats, which means it's poison. So you gotta go to the hearth and get him some charcoal to help absorb the poison. Awfully chilly in it. I do wish I could go to the hearth, but I'm so dizzy. This means he's anemic, so you gotta give him the iron. Alright. The growing boy needs to eat fruits and veg, and I haven't in a month, but I feel fine. Well, other than these sores in my mouth. That's scurvy, so we gotta go in here and get the lemon. Alright, here it is. I think I just got a whole head cold. Can I have some soup? Now the soup here was supposed to be somewhere else, but now it's just sitting on the table and you can grab it. There you go. Alright. Now you can see it's going down more and more every time because it's delay the inevitable, so he's gotta feel worse and worse as you play, you know? But we should be able to keep him alive a bit longer. Let's give him the iron. Fruits and veg again, so lemon. It gets a little repetitive after a while because we only have 6 items, but you know, you work with what you can in a game jam. Okay, he wants another lemon. It's getting kind of hard now. Feels better. Awfully chilly. Okay, iron, iron, iron. Ah. Here we go. Does this look infected? Okay, we're probably gonna die here because catching the leech is a little bit hard. Oh no. So that's basically how the game turned out. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me go through this whole process over these last 72 hours. It was an extremely challenging challenge, but I found it extremely fun. And if you're interested in this, just look up LB Jam and you can do it in the next 6 months because they happen twice a year. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next one. Huge thank you to all of my patrons, including Dumb Possum, Hannah Kendall, Jabber Dabber Doo, Teddy Spaghetti, Avant Grape, Gender Was Stolen, Haley, Beelzeboof, For Spookable, Bigish, it's Jamal, Kay, Rodrigo, Kubo, Momok, Kadaria, Deadly Nightshade Art, Maria Vasquez, Astrofox Art, Middle Z, Lily Allure, The Expressive Poker Face, Morrissey Axolotl, Tsubaki, Michael Lavali, Cutie Pie, Rune Raincrow, Rainwater Pearls, Ice Cream Pal, Cola, Insadmia, Ya Boy ST, JJ Jade, and of course, Libla Blah Blah.